and welcome to my review of the SebArt Mig 29 3D EDF ARF with 360 degree thrust vectoring. This plane weighs 2,000 grams ready to fly. It has a 92 centimeter wingspan. It runs twin 70 ducted fans. Has 9 servos, and you can put a 3400 to 4000 4-cell in it. I bought my plane from Hobby Lobby, so there it is up on the screen. I did purchase it with the gyro. I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of the flying characteristics, and then I'm going to talk about the kit itself. There's some pros and cons about the kit. So first off, let's talk about the flying. If you've looked on YouTube, there's lots of flying video of this plane. It's a real awesome flyer. It has a very wide speed envelope, so you can throttle it really fast or slow it right down, and it slows right down to like a trainer. It floats in really nice. It does all those maneuvers that you hope it to do. The high alpha, the hovering, just like the video, does the cobra. It does really cool elevators. You just cut the throttle and full up and it'll float right down to the ground. It does really tight wing loops. It actually will pivot right on the wing. So that's really neat. And it's very, very stable. The con for flying that I discovered is when the plane is in a very high altitude and you stall it, it'll do a quick aileron roll, quite quick, and or in the hovering, you see the video, some of those guys are hovering it and then they'll just roll around like that. That's actually the plane doing that. There's no aileron stick input. I'm not sure why the plane does that. Probably has something to do with the fan units, and during stall it wants to roll that plane around. So when it first does that, it's pretty scary. You're like, what was that? But it's very predictable. Don't fight it. It'll roll around and just continue on or give power and pull up. So it's quite predictable once you get used to it. So other than that little flaw, I think I give it 4.5 stars. It's a really cool flying plane. Alright, so let's talk about the build. It's EPO foam, and it's all of your servos are installed, so that's a pro, definitely. There's 9 servos. The finish is really good. It's a great looking plane, and everything went together really easy. You just have to glue on the wings and the tail surfaces, and that's about it. Now for the cons. Okay. So I bought my version with the gyro. I thought it'd be neat to fly with the gyro. Unfortunately, when I was setting up my system, because you have to do a lot of mixing with it, with all the 9 servos, I couldn't figure out why it kept, the thrust vectoring kept slowly drifting. And when I pulled out the gyro, the person who installed it stripped out the limit dial here. I don't know if you can see that, but the one on the right here is completely stripped. I couldn't even get a screwdriver in there to mess with that knob. That knob was completely destroyed. So I just ripped out the unit. I don't fly with the gyro with this plane. The other thing that happened that I noticed is they recommend throttle control, like a throttle curve for your radio. I run a DX7, it has 7 channels, which this plane requires, but there's no throttle curve. So if you need a throttle curve, you might need to look at a different radio. When I was installing it, the linkages, one of the control horns snapped in my hand. So they're quite brittle, so just be careful when you're installing the horns. Okay, so the next major problem is on my maiden takeoff. I had someone hand launch this for me. I gave full thrust, and this right unit just popped off and fell on the ground as I was taking off. Scared me because I didn't know if the plane was going to continue flying, but thankfully it landed safely. It actually didn't affect the flight characteristics as far as I could tell without that thrust vectoring unit there. And what happened was, along this body, basically the body is a two-piece body. There's this bottom half that glues onto the top half. And whoever glued it didn't use enough glue along here, and with all this pressure forcing these round, they're kind of like balls inside this tube, it forced the ball out, splitting the body in half. So that failed the very first, basically 4 seconds into flight. So that wasn't cool. I didn't like that at all. So no damage after that flight. I flew it a couple other times, and then I started getting pretty comfortable flying it. Unfortunately, over several flights, when I finally did crash this plane, what happened was the battery strap has a piece of Velcro and a rubber piece. Right there, there's a rubber piece that holds onto the battery. And the glue between the Velcro and that rubber piece failed. So when I was pulling pretty high G's, that battery pack slammed back and caused my plane to fly like that. And I couldn't level it out, and I crashed it. So my major damage was right on the nose here, because I basically landed on the nose. One thing I don't like about EPO foam is that it compresses, and when I'm trying to piece it back together, it's all warped. So I basically had to cut some chunks out and replace that foam and try to get it back to shape. It's also very thin. The whole plane is very thin foam. I don't think there's hardly any sections of 1-inch foam anywhere, except maybe in the wing and partly in the body. But basically it's very hollow and very thin. So if you crash this plane, you're going to do a lot of damage. I did strip one of the servos. I had a bit of a hard landing. And the servos are pretty hard to replace because the wires run inside the body of the plane. So what I did was I just cut the wire, pulled the servo out, put another servo in, and then I soldered the leads together. And that seemed to work okay. And lastly, since this is very thin foam, basically the foam here is about 1/4 inch thick. Even though you have these tough landing skids, they're great. I love these skids. However, don't think that you can just drop this down, because it does hover and you can just go and drop it down. If you have some really thick grass and soft grass, that might be okay, but you will end up breaking this. I have to do a little bit of repair here, because this foam underneath these nacelles is only about 1/4 inch, and if you land really hard on this, you're going to crack and break that. So I land this like a scale jet now. I keep it level and just fly it in, bleed off as much speed as I can, touch down, kill the power, but I always land it with some power on now, because it's a really fragile plane. So if you're thinking of buying this plane, be aware of some of the flaws. The battery strap, I've put in a couple extra battery straps in here to secure my battery down better. Re-glue everything. Get in there with some epoxy, and especially those main, the main piece where the planes comes together. Glue that, because that I found failed. Also, yeah, I think that's it. So there you have it. The MiG-29. I have some flight video here for you. I hope you enjoyed my review, and happy flying. Take care. Bye.